Hello, I'm Fantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to talk about the new evolutions and upgrades that have just gone live in North America. So there was a ton of different things in the latest day to download, and I will not be talking about the new Godfest exclusives nor the Dragonbound Dragon Collar. Those will be addressed in a subsequent video, and instead I'm going to be focusing on all the new evolutions and upgrades that we have received. So as a general blanket statement, I feel that these kind of buffs are one of my most exciting times because there's a strong likelihood you actually own these cards because they come from the rare machine itself. And I'm going to be going through over all the different cards that receive new evolutions and buffs across two different pages because information is not necessarily organized the best on the Gung Ho website. So the first new evolution is Matcha, and Matcha is still in an awkward place, I feel, overall, because she has a leader swap active on a 25-turn cooldown. Yes, her multiple skill charges allow her to actually greatly reduce the amount of turns you need to stall, but the problem is, right now, leader swapping tends to be most efficient when you do it utilizing 7x6 for World of Carnage 2 or rank experience abuse. And is Matcha really the leader you want to swap in? Because I say this, the reason for that is the Gung Ho collab, it has many different options for leader swapping on an 18-turn cooldown. And if you inherit Matcha or the Gung Ho collab cards, it's an 18 versus a 25-turn cooldown, and there's no Awakenings transfer because none of them are weapon assists. So with that in mind, I'm much less inclined to obviously use Matcha as an inherit. And as a leader, like, you're reasonable. Like, you have 21 times attack, 50% damage reduction when you match Rainbow type activation, and you need to match 5 or more Link Doors for auto follow attack. So, like, she is a reasonable card, but is she great? I don't know. Like, I feel like it's not something I really want to utilize as a leader. It's just not enough bulk, enough effective health, enough value to truly take off. And it's just a bit of an awkward card. And furthermore, one thing that I find problematic about leader swap cards is that their active skill, you can't use it a second time because you're going to swap yourself back again. And you don't want to swap back, so you got to let Matcha, like, overcharge to their inherit in order to give yourself something else of value. Next is Morigoo, and Morigoo actually is quite an interesting card now. So you can have 4 skill boosts, and you have strong VDP damage against devils or gods, and you can get a 10 combo Super Awakening. So your damage output is definitely quite high. And her active skill gives you +3 combos and then removes ore blocks and creates a 3x3 box of dark. So instantaneous VDP makers are helpful when you're trying to farm something quickly or playing through ranking dungeons because you press the active, it makes the orbs for you in the specific pattern, and life becomes much easier. Problem with Morigoo is that there's extra animation, so in theory, like, it takes more time and in turn makes your clears a little slower. Is that going to be something that's truly magical or important for yourself? Maybe, maybe not, but the bonus combos could help you overcome combo shields, and the orb block ensures that you're guaranteed to always have those orbs generated. Of course, if you're utilizing her in a non, like, farming setup, I don't think she's really going to fit on your mono dark teams that well because, well, without the VDPs, your damage may not be necessarily the greatest, and the active skill itself doesn't really counter mechanics. It doesn't, like, overwrite any debuffs, that sort of thing. So I feel like she's kind of a situational card. I feel like if you don't have any instantaneous VDP makers like Inola or like Yusuke or whatever, there's several other options, it could be something of value for yourself. As a leader, you have no damage reduction, and you have a massive health pool, so, like, Safi is, like, the best at this type of game, and Safi is stronger for Monster Hunter because they actually have the damage reduction aspect. Morigoo is just going to be a big amount of health, so any gravity is going to be a problem. Condolee will be utilizing the new Rashana gem, which is going to be utilized across a couple of different evolutions. And in his new Super Reincarnate form, you could have 777 Killer, or you could have 4 skill boosts. You get Super Blind, you get L, you get Follow-up Attack. You have a nice mix of utility. And your active skill changes Fire Hearts to Water, Jammer Poison to heal, 2 combos, and fully restore health. So, like, you're not a bad card in the sense that, like, you have skill boosts, you have reasonable personal damage, you have pretty decent health as well. The issue is, I feel, is he really going to overcome or surpass other options available? Because right now, when you're trying to build teams, you have to be quite picky of who you pick as a sub. And this 13-turn cooldown, while it's not a bad effect, is not actually countering mechanics. It's not overcoming those debuffs. And he's not going to be your main damage dealer. He just doesn't have the personal damage multipliers that outpace someone like Velkhana or Norza, etc. Like, they will just hit harder naturally. So I think he's a reasonable card, but at the same time, it's going to be hard to truly capitalize. On the other hand, his weapon assist gives you full bind immunity and 3 enhanced water orbs, and that same kind of awkward active skill. So if you are looking for a weapon assist that gives you full bind immunity and you don't have lots of Quillen Dragon Gems to make the Chinese Celestials, this could be a reasonable alternative. Yes, you don't get the skill boost, which can be problematic, but you get more concentrated orb enhanced damage, and you may or may not always need the skill boost, so it's not a bad thing to have available, and this is kind of be a similar outlook for the other cards in the series. So Akola, similar idea. You have the exact same set of awakenings aside from Super Blind becoming Super Jammer. So useful to have for sure, but the thing is, you compete so much with Geron, and you have to think, well, Geron is farmable, and Geron has 4 skill boosts before they transform, and then they have 10 combo, 7 combo, VDP, Super Jammer resist as well. So we have to think, is Akola going to outpace Geron? And we need to take a look at their active skill. So their active skill is on a 10-turn cooldown, so worse than Geron's 7. You get plus 3 combos for 2 turns. Change a road to wood. Geron is a full board changer with haste on a lower cooldown, which in my head is a much more valuable active when you're playing through things like Shura Realm, etc. So I don't think Akola is going to outpace a farmable. And if you don't outpace a farmable, there's no reason why you're going to really exist on a given team, because in theory, you can beat Geron once, get all your pies to the Gung-Ho collab dungeon, have a much stronger sub overall. So I think it's okay, but at the same time, it's probably going to be a higher opportunity cost. And with that in mind, maybe you want to look at her weapon assist. Because again, similar idea. It's the orb enhances with the full bind immunity and the recover bind. So it's kind of like an alternative to Nay weapons in the sense if you need recover bind. It gives you full bind immunity, gives you much more concentrated orb enhanced damage. Not a bad thing overall, but again, the active skill is not necessarily going to solve problems. Reincarnated Vag has no more co-op boost awakening, so he's not going to be your button base that you were thinking of beforehand. Like in his other evolved form, the reincarnated form, he's a button base. But if you're not button farming, evolving him into his new form might have some meaning and merits, because you can have 5 skill boosts, or you can have reasonable personal damage. You also give bonus passive damage with these enhanced combo awakenings, which does add up quite quickly, and the L is always helpful to have. If you don't have an L anywhere on your team, you want to bring at least 1 L awakening. His active skill gives you 3 times attack for dark for 3 turns, and then 6 dark orbs made at random. So as far as active skills go, I feel like this one is a more helpful active skill, because you get 6 dark orbs, which means you can make a row, or you're much more likely to have a VDP ready, and the attack buff is meaningful. It overwrites debuffs, it helps ensure things die. So as a sub, I think he's a reasonable solution. Is he better than other things? Maybe not necessarily, mostly because tape resist is at kind of a lower priority. If it was a super resist of any other kind, it'd probably make him a little bit more desirable. But at the same time, I think it's okay. But in terms of like novelty and usage, I feel like their base form has a bit more just because of the button aspect. But at the same time, like maybe you want to use an easy to use leader with 3 colors for auto follow attack. It's still a bit more effort, I think. It's not necessarily worth it. For their weapon assist, follows the exact same pattern, but you at least have an active skill that's not bad. Like, I wouldn't be too upset if this active skill charged up, because I get orbs, I get burst. Not a bad thing. So if you need to protect someone who's vulnerable to binds, this may not be a bad solution overall. And now we come to the 7-star Godfist exclusives who receive new weapon assists, Grandis, Yuri, and Jiria. And all of them follow a similar template for their active skills. But at the same time, you have to consider the opportunity cost of not using their base form, which is the biggest issue with Grandis, because Grandis in his transforming state is one of the strongest mono fire cards in the game. So if you don't have multiple Grandis or Grandi, you probably should not be looking at this weapon, because I don't think it's going to outpace what Grandis can do for a given team. Because this weapon gives you triple team health, which is nice. There are other triple team health weapons available, so it may not necessarily be that unique. But again, it does have stat transfer for fire cards, so that could help. The fire rows are meaningful as well, because you can mass attack more efficiently, because if you have rows, you make that row, you get a bit of extra damage, much more likely to sweep spawns in World of Carnage 2, never a bad thing to have. In terms of the active skill, you get a full board of fire and heart orbs, and then you have fire orbs locked as they appear. this is not a Skyfall buff for the orbs actually appearing. It's that when the fire orb drops down, it is locked. And I feel like this is kind of an awkward-ish active. Like, it gives you a board changer, so I guess you could use it to, like, kind of kill stuff, because a bicolor board is really easy to solve in terms of, like, desirable patterns. But at the same time, it's not that amazing. Like, having fire orbs appear locked, like, unless there's tons of orb changers or tons of spinners, I don't think it's necessarily going to change your life. And again, the opportunity cost of not using Grandis in their base or transforming form is too high. Like, I have one Grandis and I don't intend to make this weapon assist. If you have multiple Grandis and you need health for your Sena team, maybe it's an option you could think about. Next is Jiria. And their weapon gives you 4 poison resist with follow-up attack. And this is so similar to the Samurai 3 weapon, which gives you 4 poison resist and skill boost. So you have to think to yourself, do I need this follow-up attack awakening? And if I do, what team am I going to be utilizing it on? So we look at like the big wood teams right now. It's New Year's Artemis and Nadeko tend to be some of the big players, or whatnot. So New Year's Artemis has auto follow attack, so this is obviously a useless weapon for that aspect there. The Deco teams don't have auto follow-up attack, but again, depending on the subs and team composition you run, you may have follow-up attack anyways. You might be using a green cotton for your weapon assist, which has follow-up attack, has bind immunity, has a much stronger active skill, because this active is the same idea, a bicolor board and wood orbs appearing is locked. It doesn't solve mechanics, it doesn't give you damage reduction, it doesn't buff your stats in like a time RCV or anything else in meaningful ways. So I feel like this is a weapon, again, that is just a bit underwhelming if you have other options available, and this Godfest exclusive just continues to remain a bit of an awkward card. Yuri is, I don't know how far down the totem pole she is for Norza teams in terms of like a 2-turn active skill, but like she does have some value if you have no duplicate Norzas. But her weapon assist might be kind of interesting because it gives you that bind immunity, which is helpful for sure, and it gives you 4 water rose. So if you are a water-based team that matches rose, this can be a great way for you to layer in additional damage. And again, that same active skill is not terrible if it does occur, but again, if you need rose, you need bind immunity, it may not be a bad choice. And also you have to consider the fact that Yuri herself is not that great right now. She doesn't really fulfill any role like as the best possible option. But again, these evolution materials might be kind of pricey, so don't just make these willy-nilly, so to speak, because it's not a 99 turn Skyfall buff, it's just making the orbs appear locked. EA received a new evolution, and I still feel like they're a little awkward because, yes, they have lots of TPAs, they have a 10 combo, they can get a 7 combo, you might think, wow, this could be reasonable personal damage, and then you look at their comically low attack set. Yes, the stats improve at 110, yes, you can add pluses, but the point of the matter is it's still a low stat. They also come with super blind and skill charge, so they could potentially have some utility aspects there. And their active skill gives you +3 combos and vastly reduced damage for 1 turn. So you can think, well, I could potentially be a damage solution or shielding solution for Shura 2 or World of Carnage 2. Not a terrible thing overall, but at the same time, is it really going to outpace other options? I don't necessarily think it will. It's just kind of a bit of an awkward place overall. For Nikido, in their Evolve form, they have basically a similar layout, but they have a little bit better of attack. But you have to think, can I outpace other wood-based subs? Because if we just look at the Awakenings, you could get 4 skill boosts, or you could have reasonable personal damage. And Super Jammer Resist is also included. But again, when I see Super Jammer Resist on a wood card, I think, can they beat Geron? Because there's kind of unnecessary to run both Geron and someone else. It's kind of like you're wasting a little bit. And Geron is farmable. And Nikido, will you outpace Geron? Well, you might potentially, because you bring different aspects. Because you make 4 Wood Orbs at random, give you 2 times RCV, and Wood Orbs more likely to appear for 4 turns. So this is on a 6-turn cooldown, so you get a pretty good Skyfall loop, so to speak, but you actually are buffing something of value while also generating Wood Orbs. And it's Wood Orbs that are generated not from fire, because I feel like for wood-based teams, lots of them are Nadeko-based and New Year's Artemis-based, and both of those take away fire orbs to wood. And because of that, you can potentially have some orb fatigue, so to speak. Even if you have orb changers ready, you may not even have fire orbs because of all the silly orb changes that can happen. So being able to make 4 guaranteed is not a bad thing because you can use your other orb changers, then you use her afterwards. Not a bad thing. And the personal damage is okay. Geron obviously has much more health, but it's not a terrible option at the same time. And her evolution materials are basically nothing. So this is definitely a strong alternative and much more budget friendly by comparison. Like, I have Geron, and I feel like I probably would still be using Geron, but at the same time, it's not a bad thing if I know there's lots of RCV debuffs, because that's a respectable cooldown you can work around. Reincarnated Belisle, I think, takes a very expensive gem to make, which could be a little problematic, and they are just an average card, I feel, overall. Like, they have 1 resist of Cloud Resist. They could have 777 combo, but it's probably not going to be that big a deal. You're probably better off the Skill Boost or Skill Boost Plus. And now you have 4 Skill Boost. You have passive damage with your Orb Enhances, but the active skill, while a low cooldown, doesn't solve things. Like, you make wood to fire, and, like, is that something that's truly going to help, like, your Sena teams or your Gillian teams? It's an orb changer, sure, but you're not countering mechanics. Like, you have these passive damage, but Gremory has that passive damage, but Gremory brings a better active skill. Horus brings more value to the table, because Belisle's active doesn't counter mechanics. And if you don't counter any mechanic, and you don't have, like, stupendous personal damage, it's going to be hard for you to fit yourself into a given team. So, I think Belisle is nice, but for the cost to make it, I don't recommend it for the average player. On the other hand, I think Ceres is a great card and a much cheaper evolution requirement, I think, overall. Maybe I could be mistaken. Maybe I'm mixing up the gems. Maybe that's cheaper than it is. I don't know. Point of the matter is, Ceres is actually a valuable card because she has those 2 enhanced wood combos, which is nice. We love those things. You could have 3 of Super Awakenings or more skill boosts or Super Blind. So you have nice flexibility of your Super Awakenings depending on what you actually need for a given dungeon. But the reason why I like this card is not only do you improve the healing output of a given team, which is helpful for sure, like why not always heal back to full health with relative ease, but you have a valuable active skill. You recover 30% of your health, which may or may not be relevant, but then you reduce binds and awoken binds by 7 and unable to match orb effects by 7 on a 6-turn cooldown. So this is a great active skill to have. Like, in all terms of endgame content, it's almost enough for most of your needs. Like, yes, you're probably going to inherit a stronger weapon assist over top of her to deal with the ogres in World of Carnage 2, but for the other spawns, outside of Odin Dragon, if you just need to wait 3 turns, which is not too bad, you have enough of an active skill to cover it. If you look at World of Carnage 1, this active skill covers all the necessary spawns that can have unable to match orb effects or the Awoken Binds. So, as a whole, if you don't have a Fasca or you can't squeeze Fasca into your team because of the lack of skill boost, Ceres will be a great alternative. And this morning, I just made Ceres to make sure I remind myself I have it and I could possibly utilize her across my mono wood teams. So, fun times overall. Now, I'm going to switch to Pad Product because Gung Ho does a terrible job. Like, they'll show me a little buff here and then the card will appear further down, and it's impossible just to keep a continuous train of thought of what is happening. So we're going to transition to a slightly different screen, and Pad Product is a wonderful website and resource. Basically, you can translate, well, they translate all the JP information into something that we can understand, and they do a great job of actually organizing their information because they show all the buffs in one spot, not 3 different times, which makes absolutely no sense. One part each way. It's silly. Either way, great resource to utilize. So let's take a look at what new cards got buffed. Now these are the buffed cards. So Almond has been significantly improved. As a leader, you have the same amount of time extend, but you have extra team health. So I know Ramen, who is an avid Almond player, he's probably jumping for joy of all the new happiness that they can bring. More skill boost, more health, just more everything of happiness. And even his weapon assist has been improved. You get a skill boost and a team health. You just need to be aware of the fact that it's a low base cooldown. So if you're looking for a skill boost weapon, you're going to have to be mindful of the fact that it could accidentally overcharge if you're not paying attention. But at the same time, it's actually pretty strong. You get a team health, you get a skill boost, you get 40% poison resist. This is actually a pretty good weapon considering it is farmable with monster points. For Mut, she's improved her healing output for sure because you have an extra enhanced heart orb. You can have more skill boosts. You'd have super poison resist. You have a small 4-turn cooldown that can unlock orbs, but at the same time, maybe you could utilize it on your Velkhana teams if you need a card with nice utility, and this could be what you were looking for because it has the L which you want to have, it has the healing output, it has skill boost, it has super poison resist if you don't have that anywhere else in your team. So as a healing solution for Velkhana based teams, I definitely foresee Mut being a much stronger based option just because she's got a low base cooldown, easy to inherit over top of. Only drawback is, well, it doesn't technically counter mechanics with her active skill, but hey, with a 4-turn cooldown, you can inherit something over top to make it a bit more impactful. For her weapon, it's got bind immunity, which we have plenty of options for nowadays, but it gives team RCV and jammer resist. Just be aware that it has this low cooldown, so you don't want to accidentally overcharge it. For Konnosu, they have just more skill boosts, and they have just ability to unlock orbs. One drawback is the active skill now has an extra level of animation, which if you're using it for an instantaneous row maker, it's going to be a little sadder. For their weapon assist, if you are utilizing mono wood teams and you need passive damage and you are actually matching wood rows, it's a decent option if you can play around the low cooldown because it has extra bulk, and extra bulk is not going to be a bad thing overall. For Algetty, she gains significant number of more awakenings, and she becomes a reasonable solution for void spawns against gods, but a lot of her kit revolves around jammers, like Jammer Blessing. Like, I don't think that's an exciting aspect. It's just, jammers, ugh. And her active skill would have been great if she didn't make jammers. Like, I guess you could play around the fact that there are 3 jammers, you could match it, and it probably keeps the active skill at a lower cooldown because you get 1.25 times movement time and 1.2 times attack buff on a 3-turn cooldown of a little bit of orb generation. So it's obviously not as good as a Nadeko, nowhere near by comparison, and don't awaken her jammer surges, but not a terrible option either. On the other hand, if you were going to look at her evolved form, you have a bunch of wood rows, a bunch of enhanced combos, you have skill boost, super poison. Like, it's not terrible overall, and I'm pretty sure they share the exact same active skill, so a better array of awakenings, so maybe you could possibly utilize them on your teams if you don't have like Albert, Fasco, or other better solutions for providing these buffs. Alcyone has been buffed to have lots of light rows, and well, same light rows, but more skill boosts. They can have 6 skill boosts. So a 6 skill boost card is actually pretty useful overall if you need to transform someone right away. And obviously if you match rows, it gives a bit more zest. At the same time, is this something you necessarily want to bring into a dungeon? Like, it's actually potentially 7 effective skill boosts because of the haste. You get dark and hazards and heal into light orbs. So a heavy orb generating active skill. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of a reasonably generic card unless you need a monstrous amount of skill boost for your mono light team. In their other form, they have more awakenings, which is helpful. They have the nice enhanced combo awakenings. They could get 4 skill boosts. They could have a tiny bit more personal damage. You're probably going to want to take the skill boost option. So, like, they could be an okay card, but like I feel like this form, like, it's more about the passive damage provided, but at the same time, this is better passive damage compared to Rose. You just get less skill boost, and assuming they share the same active skill, you have another way to flood the board with light orbs, but not necessarily overcome mechanics. Dark Raw Dragon, like, it's cool, but I don't think it's going to necessarily make a splash anywhere particular because it's just a card that exists. And it's like a rainbow board changer of haste. Nothing truly magical. For Red Miru, if you have her, you need to match combos and you get a big attack multiplier. And then you also get bonus combos and reduced damage taken by more than 50%. So your damage reduction is actually higher when you match a Heart Cross. So if you like Heart Crossing and you can find a way to have 5 heart orbs on a regular continuous basis, and her active skill does help with that, you can potentially clear a respectable amount of content. But at the same time, as soon as you don't have 5 heart orbs, you go splat. But your effective health is actually quite high, especially considering it's largely damage reduction based. For Guardian of the Water City Athena, or Bath Blue Athena, she has more TPA damage, more skill boosts, but and 3-turn delay, and the ability to clear unable to match or effects and bind and awoken binds by a few turns. So like this active skill is trying to do something. Water-based teams don't really use TPA either. It's cool and all, but like I don't feel like it's going to be enough to really bring her into true relevance. Red, Ragnarok Dragon received a significant upgrade to their active skill, but at the same time, it's an active that just gives bonus combo with a generic rainbow board changes. So nothing truly magical overall. And like they have an okay leader skill, they have reasonable personal damage, but at the same time, they're not countering or overcoming mechanics. They're just a generic card that is easily overlooked. For Bastet, she has, or Light Bastet, she has a 1-turn cooldown, but it doesn't necessarily solve any issues aside from unlocking the board. So you have to think, well, this is kind of like Horus potentially, because Horus also unlocks the board. And this is what I think. Horus with a 2-turn cooldown versus Bastet's 1. Bastet brings you more effective health and bulk because of the team HP is 2 versus 1 for Horus. But she doesn't have guard break, she doesn't have L, and I would prefer to use Horus because he at least buffs your movement time. So just a stronger way to counter mechanics. So I don't feel like she's necessarily going to be the best choice overall. For Morigoo in her non-new evolved form, she's got 6 skill boosts, but remember, this active skill is only going to be a attack buff and combo count buff, not actually doing other stuff. So I feel like it's cool that you have all these skill boosts, but it's going to be hard to truly take advantage of it when you have a longish cooldown with not necessarily an effect you want to truly capitalize on. I feel like her new evolve form is more unique and meaningful because it provides that instantaneous 3x3 box, which is hard to replicate. Toragon is a cross wizard. You get more effective health, but at the same time, crosses are just awkward. Maybe for certain niche situations, you might utilize it. But we're going to now look at one of the most exciting buffs in this whole series, because Akine has become one of the greatest weapons and a truly outstanding rainbow sub as well. So Akine's weapon now gives you a skill boost along with bind immunity and 20% hazard resist. So it's like a skill boost with bind immunity. You always think, well, how do they compare to Chinese Celestials, because those are kind of accessible. But this didn't require any evolving. You didn't have to get a Quillen Dragon Gem, so you lose out some passive damage, but you get these resists, which has synergy if you utilize any Samurai 3 weapon. With a Samurai 3 weapon, you get 80% resist on one metric, and then the 20% from Akine. This is great, but they get significantly stronger with their new active skill, because the new active skill applies to both cards, the weapon and their evolved form. So this new active skill is 3 turns less cooldown, so 25 to 22 turns. With her many skill charges, it's offset for sure. It's potentially done in 8 turns if you're lucky. But what makes this now strong is that you get 2 turns of 50% damage reduction. And you always need to have damage reduction when you play through World of Carnage 2. You just need to have it somewhere on your team. And for rainbow-based teams, this is possibly going to be the best solution, because not only do you get the damage reduction, which you need, you get 2 turns of bypassing damage void effects. So you don't need to utilize the VDP Latent. You don't need to use Algae at all. You can utilize this active skill. So you got the shield, you have the ability to counter voids, you unlock orbs so you don't get orb trolled, and you change the whole board to rainbow. It's such a beautiful active skill now. Like, for rainbow-based teams, I would be tremendously excited. And you can even utilize her as a sub. As a sub, you have 6 skill boosts. Amazing. Transforming easily, leader swapping more easily. You get follow-up attack if necessary. You get L, which might be helpful. And you have the copious amounts of skill charges to make this active skill come up more often, which is your damage reduction, void counter, and a board changer. It's a much more jam-packed rainbow sub, but you have to be mindful of the fact that they have 0 personal damage. So remember, this weapon has the same active skill effect, and if you utilize it on top of someone with skill charge, you can have it ready on a more regular basis, or just put it on herself. But for her leader skill, you have 2.2 times stats for God-type cards, and you can have huge multipliers like big health, big recovery, big attack, but you have no damage reduction. And without any damage reduction, it's just not going to necessarily work that well. You're going to get killed by anything gravity-based. It's just going to be a little awkward. There's no bonus combos, no auto-follow attack. Like, even with asymmetrical pairings, you have to be God-type based. Dire wants gods, but Dire needs 10 combos. You don't get the bonus combos. It's just an awkward thing overall. So as a rainbow sub, great. As a weapon, great. But as a leader, not so great. But there's plenty of other good ways to utilize her. For Venus, it's now a 2-turn cooldown, so it's a little easier to inherit over top of it. You get to give orb movement time, not a bad thing overall. It's kind of like Diao Chan in the sense that you have a movement time buff, but Diao Chan gives you other utility. Venus also has an L, but more personal damage. And as a leader, like, you get damage reduction when you match 5 orbs in an L shape. It's nowhere near enough to keep abreast of other options available, I feel, because, like, you can have reasonable attack sets. 16 times is kind of low, though, to be honest. Like, it's just too low to really make it work. For Freya, you get 2 turns of haste, so hey, more effective skill boost, never a bad thing. And for their leader skill, they have more bulk, they have higher attack, and they get +3 combos when matching 5 or more connected wood orbs. In the future, there will be a new Godfest exclusive that likes the blob, so it may not be a terrible thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind for future stuff that can come out. For Estromale, she has a greatly increased active skill on an 8-turn cooldown. She can now provide you with 99 turns of Dark Orb Skyfall on an 8-turn cooldown, and then you can just keep reusing it to generate extra orbs. Main drawback is Nergigante is just a superior option because it's a stronger Skyfall chance, which you can loop with himself and has a lower base cooldown. So Nergigante is just a better choice, but if you don't have Nergigante, you don't have any other like high skill or Skyfall boosting active skills, Estromale just became a more accessible option. Yuri has been buffed to have 1 turn of 1.5 times attack alongside of her orb movement time and 6 fire, dark, and hard orb generating. This is definitely a much stronger active skill, but the problem is the cooldown. She's just, like, the fire orb aspect is really killing this active. If it didn't make fire orbs, the cooldown could be 3 turns for sure. And then it'd be much more valuable, I'd say, overall. Because with 4 turns, it's a little longer. Like, we look at Norza. Norza's 2 turns. Yes, it does only make 3 orbs of water and hearts, but it gives you orb movement time and RCV buff. So 2 helpful buffs, but on a 2-turn cooldown, so it's much more accessible. You can system it. Yuri, you can't system it. And with the 4-turn cooldown, it can be a little harder to work around. With her leader skill, you can match any L shape, which is nice, but the restrictions, it's better off to use Fatalis and leader swap in all honesty, or just use Fatalis, which is a stronger option overall. And you can abuse the 7x6 board from Yuri, but the active skill has been significantly buffed. I have terrible allergies, by the way. But her active skill has been significantly buffed because now you don't have to rely on other people for attack buffing if that was something you had to work around on your team. For Mieda, they are now able to do 3 turns of delay, so easier to charge up maybe like leader swapping cards, etc. Because I have possibly utilized, like, say, Mieda leader, and then you can swap in. But again, you need to hit 18 skill boosts, which could be hard because they bring none in their base form. I have used Crab paired with Mieda, no leader swapping whatsoever, and cleared Shura 2. It's definitely doable, but it's a little awkward to work around when you don't have any skill boosts in your base form sometimes, and you want to leader swap and you're a 7x6. It's just a little hard. But once they transform, you get more orb movement time, which I don't think is necessary. But the cooldown got reduced to 3 turns. So hey, a big cooldown reduction. That's a significant reduction in cooldown from 4 to 3 turns. You get 6 water orbs from non-hard orbs. Great way to just keep flooding yourself with extra orb generations. So that covers all the buffs and new evolutions that have gone live. Remember, I'm going to talk about the new Godfest exclusives and the Dragonbound Dragoncaller in subsequent days because they haven't technically come out yet. But either way, let me know what you think about the new buffs and upgrades in the comments below. Who are you most excited for? Because for myself, I think Akine gained one of the biggest buffs, as well as Ceres for her new evolution, because it's a great wood cleric solution now. So other than that, hopefully you all have a fantastic day. I wish you all the best luck in your own pad adventures, and happy puzzling.